Gold digger tries to take advantage of customer at a diner. The ending is shocking. The moment Alfred Cole walked into Moonlight Diner on that rainy Friday morning, Tina Reynolds knew he was different from the usual crowd. It wasn't just the perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, or the subtle gleam of his platinum watch catching the fluorescent lights. It was the way he carried himself, quiet confidence, without the need to announce his presence. "Table for one, please," he said, his voice gentle but commanding. Tina smoothed down her waitress uniform and flashed her brightest smile, the one she reserved for customers who looked like they could leave generous tips. At 26, with 3 years working at this roadside diner and not much to show for it besides mounting debt, she had developed a knack for sizing people up. "Right this way, sir." She guided him to a booth by the window, where raindrops raced down the glass like tears. "Our special today is the country breakfast with homemade biscuits." Mr. Cole, as she would later learn to call him, nodded politely and ordered just black coffee and toast to start. As Tina walked away, she felt his eyes following her. Not in the leering way she was accustomed to from truckers and college boys, but with a kind of thoughtful curiosity. Back at the counter, Marge, the 50-something veteran waitress with perpetually tired eyes, nudged her. "Don't waste your time, honey, that one's been coming in every Friday for 6 months. Tips well but keeps to himself. Reads his newspaper and leaves." "Every Friday?" Tina raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the pattern. Regular customers meant predictable income. Predictable wealthy customers were even better. "Like clockwork," Marge confirmed, wiping down the counter. "Some kind of businessman, I think. Never seen him with anyone though." Tina brought his coffee, taking extra care not to spill a drop. "Have you decided on anything else, sir?" He looked up from his newspaper. She noted it was the financial section, and offered a small smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair, and deep laugh lines that spoke of a life lived fully. "I'll try your special, thank you." He folded the newspaper neatly. "And your name is?" "Tina," she replied, suddenly aware of how the cheap plastic name tag hung crookedly on her uniform. "Thank you, Tina, I'm Alfred Cole. But please, call me Al." She nodded, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, a gesture she knew made her look younger, more vulnerable. Men like him often went for that. "I'll get your order right in, Mr. Cole." Throughout his meal, Tina made sure his coffee cup never emptied, stopping by his table more frequently than necessary. She dropped small personal details, how she was working to save up for her dreams, how tough the economy had been, the kind of conversational bait that usually prompted men to play hero. Mr. Cole listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, but made no grand gestures or offers. When he left, however, she discovered a $50 tip on a $15 meal with a small note that simply read, "Thank you for the excellent service." "Told you he tips well," Marge said, eyeing the bill. "But don't get any ideas. Men like that have seen it all before." But Tina wasn't deterred. In fact, she was more convinced than ever that Alfred Cole was exactly what she'd been waiting for. Single, wealthy, generous, and if his solitary visits were any indication, lonely. The perfect mark. "We'll see about that," she murmured, pocketing the $50. The following Friday, Tina volunteered to work the morning shift, something she usually avoided. She spent extra time on her appearance, subtle makeup that emphasized her blue eyes, a dab of vanilla perfume that wasn't overpowering but would register subconsciously. Sure enough, at precisely 9:15 a.m., Mr. Cole arrived, dressed impeccably in a navy suit this time. Tina made sure she was the one to greet him. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said, already reaching for a menu. "Same booth?" He looked pleasantly surprised that she remembered him. "Yes, thank you, Tina." This time she was bolder. When she brought his coffee, she lingered. "I wanted to thank you for your generosity last week. It really made a difference." "I believe in recognizing good service," he replied, studying her with those perceptive brown eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. Over the next few Fridays a routine developed. Mr. Cole would arrive, Tina would serve him, and they would exchange increasingly personal snippets of conversation. She learned he was a widower, that he had no children, that he traveled frequently for business. Each detail she filed away like currency to be spent later. The other waitstaff began to notice. "You're playing with fire," warned Marge during a quiet moment. "Men with money like that don't just hand it over to pretty young things without expecting something in return." "Maybe I'm willing to give something in return," Tina replied with a wink that made Marge roll her eyes. But privately, Tina had bigger plans than just flirtation. She'd grown up watching her mother work 2 jobs to support them after her father left, had sworn she'd find an easier path. And here it was, walking in every Friday like clockwork, leaving generous tips and looking at her with growing interest. 6 weeks into their acquaintance, Tina accidentally knocked over Mr. Cole's water glass, sending it splashing onto his expensive trousers. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, rushing to dab at the spill with napkins. Allowing her hand to brush against his leg. "Please, let me pay for the dry cleaning." "No need," he assured her, seemingly unfazed by the incident. Accidents happen. But as she helped clean up, Tina noticed something she hadn't before, a business card that had fallen from his jacket pocket. She managed to glimpse the embossed lettering, A. Cole, Senior Investment Advisor, Meridian Partners. Investment Advisor. Jackpot? As Mr. Cole left that day, leaving another generous tip despite the water incident, Tina's mind was already racing with possibilities. An investment advisor meant access to money, lots of it, and a lonely widower with no children. There would be no one to compete with for his attention. His resources, his wealth. "See you next Friday, Mr. Cole," she called after him, her voice honey-sweet. He turned back with that same measured smile. "I look forward to it, Tina." Little did he know she was already laying the groundwork for a plan that would transform their simple server-customer relationship into something far more profitable for her. Over the next 3 weeks, Tina carefully constructed a narrative designed to ensnare Mr. Cole's sympathy and eventually his wallet. Each Friday she revealed a new hardship, carefully timing her confessions during quiet moments when she could maintain the illusion of reluctantly sharing her troubles. "I don't mean to burden you with my problems," she said one rainy morning, eyes downcast as she refilled his coffee. "It's just that the landlord raised the rent again. 3rd time this year," she sighed dramatically. "I'm beginning to think I'll never get ahead." Mr. Cole's brow furrowed with concern. "That sounds difficult. The housing market can be unforgiving these days." "Tell me about it," Tina replied, leaning slightly closer. "I've been looking for a second job, but with my community college classes, there just aren't enough hours in the day." Another carefully crafted lie. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester. When Mr. Cole's meal arrived, he surprised her by asking, "Please join me for a moment if you can. It's quiet this morning." Tina glanced around the nearly empty diner and slid into the booth opposite him, arranging her face into what she hoped was an expression of grateful weariness. "Just for a minute, don't want to get in trouble with management." "What are you studying?" he asked, cutting into his omelet. "Business administration," she lied smoothly. "I've always dreamed of running my own little boutique someday. Something classy, you know. But dreams cost money." She laughed lightly, as if mocking her own aspirations. Mr. Cole nodded thoughtfully. "Dreams are worth investing in. My late wife was in fashion design, started with just a small workspace and built it into something remarkable." This was the first substantial detail he'd shared about his wife. Tina pounced on it, sensing an opening. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, reaching across to briefly touch his hand. "How long has she been gone?" 5 years next month," he replied, a shadow crossing his features. "Cancer." It was quick, at least. "Small mercies." "That's terrible," Tina murmured, mentally filing away this gold mine of information. Emotional vulnerability was as valuable as financial data in her scheme. "It must be lonely." "It can be," he acknowledged, then changed the subject. "Tell me more about this boutique dream of yours." The following Friday, Tina arrived at work with red-rimmed eyes and a carefully rehearsed story. When Mr. Cole noticed her distress, she broke down in a performance worthy of an Oscar. "My mom's sick," she whispered, voice trembling. "She needs specialized treatment the insurance won't cover. I've been sending most of my paycheck to her, but it's not enough." She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on a customer." "I'm more than just a customer by now, I'd hope," Mr. Cole said gently. "I consider us friends, Tina." Friends? The word was a stepping stone to what she really wanted. When she brought his check that day, he handed her his credit card and said, "Add your lunch to my bill, you should eat something." It wasn't the grand gesture she'd hoped for, but it was a start. He was paying for things now, crossing that important boundary from sympathy to financial support. The student loan story came next. Tina painted a picture of crushing debt from her non-existent business degree, lamenting how the interest alone kept her trapped in an endless cycle. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning," she confessed during one of their increasingly regular conversations. "Like no matter how hard I work, I'll never break free." Mr. Cole listened with that same patient attentiveness that initially made her target him. "Financial pressure can feel that way," he agreed. "But there's always a path forward." By the 8th week of her campaign, Tina had constructed an elaborate personal history, a hard-working girl from humble beginnings, struggling against an unfair system, dreams perpetually just out of reach due to financial constraints, the perfect damsel in financial distress for a wealthy knight to rescue. And Mr. Cole was responding. He now regularly paid for her meals during her break. Once, when she mentioned her car was making strange noises, he slipped her an extra $100 for the mechanic. Small gestures, but increasing in frequency and amount. More valuable than the money was the emotional intimacy she was establishing. Mr. Cole began sharing more about his life, how he met his wife in college, their struggles building careers together, the heartbreak of not being able to have children, and finally the devastating loss when cancer took her. Eleanor always said that life is about connections, not possessions. He told Tina one quiet afternoon. "I didn't fully understand until she was gone." Tina nodded sympathetically, while inwardly calculating. A man with no children, substantial wealth, and a gaping emotional void? She couldn't have designed a better target. She began incorporating subtle touches into their interactions. A hand on his shoulder when serving coffee, sitting closer when joining him for brief conversations, letting her fingers linger when passing the check. She noted with satisfaction how his eyes followed her movements, how he seemed to brighten when she approached his table. "You're the highlight of these dreary mornings, Tina," he told her one day, causing Marge to roll her eyes from behind the counter. The other staff had noticed the special attention Tina lavished on Mr. Cole. Whispers and knowing glances followed her around the diner. She didn't care, let them think she was just fishing for tips. They couldn't see the bigger picture. "You're playing a dangerous game," Marge warned her in the break room. "Men like him don't get where they are by being stupid." "He's lonely," Tina countered, applying fresh lipstick. "And I'm providing companionship." "What's wrong with that?" Marge snorted. "Just don't come crying when it backfires. I've seen your type before." But Tina was confident. After all, she'd done this before, albeit on a smaller scale. There was the bartender who'd paid her rent for 3 months before realizing she was dating his brother too. The car salesman who'd given her a suspiciously good deal before discovering she was also sleeping with his manager. Tina had refined her techniques over the years. Mr. Cole was simply the biggest fish she'd attempted to land. And now, as she watched him sip his coffee and smile at her across the diner, she was certain he was rich and emotionally vulnerable. The perfect combination. 3 months into her carefully orchestrated campaign, Tina decided it was time to raise the stakes. The small handouts and paid lunches were nice, but they weren't going to change her life. It was time to plant the seed for something bigger. On a particularly busy Friday morning, she made sure to appear more frazzled than usual. When she brought Mr. Cole his usual black coffee, her hands trembled slightly, causing drops to spill onto the sauce. "I'm so sorry," she said, quickly dabbing at the spill. "It's been one of those days." "You seem troubled," Mr. Cole observed, his eyes reflecting genuine concern. "Is everything all right?" Tina glanced around, as if checking whether anyone could overhear them, then leaned in close. "I just got off the phone with my landlord before my shift. He's selling the building, and all tenants have 60 days to vacate." She ran a hand through her hair. "In this market, I don't know where I'll go. Deposits alone are astronomical." This was her boldest lie yet, fabricated entirely to test how far Mr. Cole's generosity might extend. "That's terrible timing with everything else you're dealing with," he replied, brow furrowing. "Life keeps throwing curveballs," Tina sighed, then brightened artificially. "But I shouldn't burden you with this. What can I get you for breakfast today?" Throughout his meal, she could feel Mr. Cole watching her as she served other tables. She made sure to maintain the appearance of someone soldiering on despite personal troubles. Shoulders slightly slumped, forced smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. The occasional distant gaze out the window as if contemplating an uncertain future. When she brought his check, Tina decided to drop her masterstroke. "You know," she said, voice lowered confidentially, "sometimes I think about what life could have been if I'd had the capital to start my boutique, even just enough for a small storefront and initial inventory." She laughed self-deprecatingly. "I actually found the perfect location last week, a little shop downtown that's going for surprisingly reasonable rent. But by the time I'd save enough, someone else will have snatched it up." She shrugged, letting the implication hang in the air. "Anyway, that's life, right? Some dreams just aren't meant to be." Mr. Cole was silent for a moment, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he said something that sent a thrill of triumph through her. "Perhaps your dream doesn't have to remain just a dream, Tina." She blinked, feigning surprise. "What do you mean?" "I've made a career of recognizing potential and helping it flourish," he said, his voice measured. "From what you've shared about your boutique vision, it sounds like you've thought it through carefully." Tina's heart raced. This was it, the moment she'd been cultivating for months. "It's all I think about," she admitted, which wasn't entirely a lie. She did think about having her own business, just not in the wholesome, hard-working way she portrayed. "I believe people should have the opportunity to pursue their passions," Mr. Cole continued. "With the right backing and guidance, your boutique idea could become reality." She allowed herself to look hopeful, but not too eager. "That's kind of you to say, but I'd like to discuss this further," he interrupted gently. "Would you consider joining me for dinner tomorrow evening? Somewhere quieter than a busy diner." Tina made a show of hesitation, though inwardly she was already calculating how much she might extract from this opportunity. "I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition," he assured her. "Consider it a business meeting if that makes you more comfortable." "A business meeting," she repeated, smiling shyly. "I'd like that." As Mr. Cole left the diner, Tina could barely contain her excitement. She had him exactly where she wanted. Interested in her dreams, offering to help financially, and now inviting her outside the confines of the diner. The transition from customer to potential benefactor was proceeding perfectly. "So you finally landed a date with your golden goose?" Marge asked dryly as they closed up that evening. "It's not a date," Tina replied, reapplying her lipstick in the backroom mirror. "It's a business meeting." Marge snorted. "Sure it is. And I'm next in line for the British throne." Tina ignored her. Let Marge think what she wanted. Soon enough she'd have what she'd been working toward. That night in her apartment, Tina meticulously planned her approach. She laid out her most expensive dress, a black number that walked the perfect line between sophisticated and alluring. She researched Mr. Cole's investment firm online, finding impressive credentials and hints of significant wealth that made her pulse quicken. She rehearsed stories about her fictitious business plan, practiced expressions of grateful determination, and considered how far she might need to go physically to secure his financial commitment. Not that it mattered much. Men like Alfred Cole were predictable. Show them a damsel in distress with dreams just out of reach. Add a dash of admiration for their success. Hint at romantic interest, and they practically threw their wallets open. In her mind, Tina was already spending the money. First, a new apartment, something sleek and modern in the upscale part of town. Then a new car to replace her aging sedan. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, perhaps even investments of her own. The possibilities were intoxicating. By the time Mr. Cole texted her the restaurant address, a high-end establishment she'd only heard about but never dared enter, Tina was convinced her life was about to change dramatically. "You've earned this," she told her reflection, as she fastened a borrowed necklace around her throat the next evening. After all the double shifts and handsy customers and living paycheck to paycheck, she arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes late, a calculated move to build anticipation. The maitre d' led her to a secluded table where Mr. Cole stood to greet her, looking distinguished in a tailored suit that confirmed her suspicions about his wealth. "You look lovely," he said, helping her into her chair. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, allowing a touch of vulnerability to color her voice. "I don't often get to experience places like this." As they settled into conversation over wine that cost more than her weekly grocery budget, Tina maintained her carefully crafted persona, ambitious yet humble. Grateful for his interest, yet not desperate. She spoke passionately about her boutique concept, describing imaginary business plans and profit projections she'd fabricated based on a single business class she'd taken years ago. Mr. Cole listened attentively, occasionally asking surprisingly specific questions that forced her to improvise. But Tina was nothing if not quick on her feet. "Your vision is impressive," he said finally, swirling the remains of his wine. "I'd like to help make it a reality." And with those words, Tina knew the big fish had taken the bait. The following Friday, Mr. Cole didn't appear at his usual booth for breakfast. Tina checked her phone repeatedly, wondering if she'd somehow misplayed her hand at dinner. Had she been too obvious? Not obvious enough. The uncertainty gnawed at her as she mechanically served other customers. "Your sugar daddy finds someone younger?" Marge quipped during a lull. Before Tina could retort, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dinner was enlightening. "Would you join me this evening at my home to discuss your boutique further?" "I'll send a car." Alfred Cole. Tina's irritation evaporated. Not only was he still interested, but he was inviting her to his home and sending a car. Things were escalating faster than she'd anticipated. Problem solved, she smirked at Marge, flashing the text message. At precisely 7 p.m., a sleek black Bentley pulled up outside Tina's apartment building. The driver, a stone-faced man in a crisp uniform, opened the door without a word. As they pulled away, Tina tried to contain her excitement. This was serious money. Not just well-off, but wealthy in a way she'd only glimpsed in movies. The car wound through the city and into the exclusive hillside neighborhoods, eventually turning onto a private road that curved upward through manicured grounds. When they finally stopped, Tina found herself staring at a sprawling estate that took her breath away. Modern yet timeless, the mansion featured sweeping glass walls overlooking the city lights below. "Miss Reynolds," the driver announced, opening her door. "Mr. Cole is expecting you." Tina stepped out, suddenly conscious of how her dress, the nicest she owned, felt woefully inadequate in these surroundings. A middle-aged woman, in a sleek black outfit, greeted her at the door. "Ms. Reynolds, welcome. I'm Mrs. Hancock, Mr. Cole's house manager. Please follow me." They walked through an entrance hall with soaring ceilings and museum-quality artwork. Tina struggled to keep her jaw from dropping as they passed room after room of understated luxury. This wasn't just wealth, this was dynastic, old-money opulence that made her previous targets look like small-time players. Mrs. Hancock led her onto a terrace where Mr. Cole stood gazing out at the city vista, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned, smiling warmly. "Tina, thank you for coming. The view is spectacular at this hour, isn't it?" "It's breathtaking," she managed, mentally recalibrating her entire approach. The boutique funding she'd been angling for suddenly seemed laughably small. This man could buy her a whole shopping mall without denting his bank account. Over dinner served by a private chef at a table overlooking an infinity pool, Mr. Cole was surprisingly subdued. He spoke little of her boutique plans and instead asked questions about her childhood, her family values, her long-term aspirations. Tina navigated each query carefully, constructing answers she thought would appeal to him. "You know," he said suddenly, setting down his wine glass, "I've been wondering something." "What's that?" Tina asked, maintaining her practiced expression of attentive interest. "What would you do if I lost all my money tomorrow?" The question caught her off guard. What do you mean?" "Just a hypothetical," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "The market crashes, bad investments, legal troubles. Whatever the cause, everything gone. This house, the cars, the lifestyle, all of it, vanished, overnight." He leaned forward slightly. "Would you still be sitting across from me at this table?" Tina's mind raced. This was a test, an obvious one. "Of course I would," she said, infusing her voice with what she hoped sounded like sincerity. "Money isn't what matters to me, Alfred, it's the connection we share." He nodded slowly, but she couldn't read his expression. "Interesting. And what if the situation were reversed? If you suddenly came into tremendous wealth and I had nothing to offer you, no connections, no advice, no financial support. Would you still seek my company?" Tina forced a laugh. What an odd question, but yes, absolutely. "I value you for who you are, not what you have." The lies felt hollow even to her own ears, but she maintained her earnest expression. Mr. Cole studied her for a long moment before changing the subject, but Tina sensed something had shifted in the atmosphere. Throughout the evening, he continued dropping these strange hypotheticals between otherwise normal conversation. Would you rather have exceptional wealth but no one to share it with? Or modest means and deep connection? And do you believe a person's true character is revealed in success or failure? Each question felt like navigating a minefield. Tina crafted her responses carefully, trying to present herself as someone who valued integrity and relationships above material gain. The complete opposite of her true nature. As the night progressed, she became increasingly certain that Mr. Cole was evaluating her for something beyond a simple business investment or romantic interest. The stakes felt higher, the potential payoff larger, but the scrutiny more intense. After dessert, he led her on a tour of the house. Each room revealed new evidence of his extraordinary wealth: a climate-controlled wine cellar with bottles worth more than her car, a home theater with custom leather seating, a garage housing vintage automobiles that made her pulse quicken. In his study, a wood-paneled sanctuary with leather-bound books and a desk that probably cost more than her annual salary. Mr. Cole paused before a photograph of a stunning woman with kind eyes. "Eleanor," he said softly. "My late wife. This was her favorite room in the house." Tina stepped closer, studying the photograph with feigned reverence. "She was beautiful, she was discerning," he replied. "Especially about people." She could see through pretense in an instant. His eyes met Tina's. "I've always wished I had that gift." The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with implication. For the first time that evening, Tina felt a flicker of unease. As the driver took her home later that night, Tina's mind whirled with calculations and possibilities. The scope of Mr. Cole's wealth far exceeded her initial estimations. If she played this right, she wouldn't need to work another day in her life. Yet something about the evening left her unsettled. Those questions, the way he watched her responses. The comment about his wife's ability to see through people. "It doesn't matter," she told herself firmly, as the Bentley glided through the night. "He's just a lonely old man with too much money and no one to spend it on." By the time she arrived home, Tina had convinced herself that the evening had been a success. Mr. Cole was testing her, sure, but she'd passed with flying colors. Soon she'd never have to serve another plate of eggs or endure another leering customer. What she didn't realize was that the test had just begun, and she was already failing. Tina arrived at work the following Friday with a spring in her step. She'd spent the week researching boutique spaces online and creating a rudimentary business plan, not because she intended to actually open a store, but to maintain the illusion for Mr. Cole. She'd even drafted a budget with realistic startup costs, calculating exactly how much she could reasonably ask for without raising suspicion. The diner was unusually busy that morning. Tina barely noticed when Mr. Cole slipped in and took his regular booth, but her radar pinged when she saw he wasn't alone. A stern-looking woman in a charcoal pantsuit sat across from him, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, a leather portfolio on the table before her. Probably his accountant, Tina murmured to herself. Perfect timing. He was already bringing in financial advisors. She approached their table with her most dazzling smile. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. Your usual coffee?" He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Good morning, Tina." "Yes, coffee for both of us, please." When she returned with the coffee pot, the conversation at the table abruptly ceased. The woman studied Tina with sharp, assessing eyes. "Tina, I'd like you to meet Patricia Winters," Mr. Cole said. "My legal advisor." "Legal advisor?" That was unexpected. Tina's smile faltered momentarily, but she recovered quickly. "Lovely to meet you, Miss Winters." The woman merely nodded, her expression remaining impassive. Throughout their meal, Tina felt increasingly uneasy. Both Mr. Cole and Miss Winters watched her interactions with other customers with unusual intensity. Once, when she glanced their way, she caught them reviewing what looked like documents, speaking in hushed tones. By the time she brought their check, Tina's nerves were frayed. "Will there be anything else today?" "Actually, yes," Mr. Cole said, his tone suddenly businesslike. "Would you ask your manager to join us for a moment? There's something we need to discuss." A cold weight settled in Tina's stomach. "My manager?" "Yes." "Immediately, please." Heart pounding, Tina fetched Larry, the diner's perpetually harried manager. As they approached the table together, She noticed Miss Winters removing a small recording device from her purse. "What's going on?" Larry asked, clearly confused. Mr. Cole gestured for them both to sit. "I believe introductions are in order," he said calmly. "My name is Alfred Cole. I own Sunrise Hospitality Group." Tina blinked, the name registering slowly. Sunrise Hospitality Group was the parent company that owned the Moonlight Diner and 27 other restaurants across the state. "You're the owner?" Larry stammered, suddenly straightening his posture. "I am," Mr. Cole confirmed. "I make a point of regularly visiting all my establishments, typically without announcing myself. It provides a more authentic perspective on operations." The realization hit Tina like a physical blow. Mr. Cole wasn't just a wealthy customer, he was her boss's boss's boss. The very top of the corporate ladder. "Now," Mr. Cole continued, turning his attention to Tina, "we have a situation that requires addressing. Miss Reynolds, over the past several months you have engaged in a systematic pattern of deception and attempted manipulation." The blood drained from Tina's face. Around them, the diner's usual breakfast chatter continued, oblivious to the implosion of her world. "I don't know what you're talking about," she protested weakly. Miss Winters opened her portfolio, removing a stack of papers. "We have documented numerous instances of fabricated personal crises, designed to elicit financial assistance. The sick mother, the student loans, the eviction notice. None of these situations exist." That's not true," Tina stuttered, but her denial sounded hollow even to her own ears. "We also have evidence," Miss Winters continued relentlessly, "of your altering tip amounts on credit card receipts from multiple customers, not just Mr. Cole." Larry's eyes widened in shock. "You've been changing tip amounts? Furthermore," Mr. Cole added, "we have records of your similar activities at previous places of employment. The car dealership in Springfield, the law firm in Oak Ridge." Tina felt as if the floor were dissolving beneath her. How had he discovered all this? How long had he known? Why, she managed to ask. Why the investigation? Mr. Cole's expression remained impassive. "I value integrity in my businesses. When I noticed discrepancies in tip amounts during routine audits, I became concerned. When I observed your targeted approach toward me specifically, I became curious. The dinner invitations, the visit to my home. These were opportunities to confirm my suspicions." All those questions, Tina whispered, remembering the strange hypotheticals he'd posed during their dinner. "Character tests," he confirmed. "Tests you failed rather spectacularly." Ms. Winters pushed a document across the table toward Larry. "This outlines the evidence we've gathered regarding Ms. Reynolds' professional misconduct. As the legal representative of Sunrise Hospitality Group, I recommend immediate termination." "You're firing me?" Tina's voice rose, drawing curious glances from nearby customers. "That's the least of your concerns," Miss Winters replied coolly. "The credit card fraud alone warrants criminal charges. However," she glanced at Mr. Cole, "my client is willing to refrain from pressing charges under certain conditions." Mr. Cole folded his hands on the table. "You will resign immediately. You will not seek employment at any food service establishment within a 100-mile radius. You will repay the fraudulently obtained tips. We have calculated the total and you will never attempt to contact me or any Sunrise Hospitality employee again." The walls seemed to close in around Tina. This couldn't be happening. She'd been so careful, so calculated in her approach. "You set me up," she accused, anger breaking through her shock. "All those stories about your wife, about being lonely. You were playing me?" "No, Tina," Mr. Cole replied, his voice suddenly tired. "The stories were true. Eleanor was real. Her loss was real. Your attempt to weaponize my grief for financial gain, that was the deception here." Larry, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally spoke. "I'll need you to turn in your apron and collect your belongings." "Tina? You can't be serious," she hissed, desperation rising. "He's lying. I never—" "We have recordings," Miss Winters interrupted, tapping the device on the table. "Both audio and video, from multiple encounters. Would you like me to play them for your manager?" Tina's mouth snapped shut. Around her, the diner continued its morning rhythm, plates clattering, coffee brewing, customers chatting, all oblivious to her world imploding. "You have until the end of the day to decide whether to accept our terms," Mr. Cole said. rising from the booth. Otherwise, we press charges on Monday. As they walked away, leaving Tina frozen in shock, she heard Ms. Winters murmur to Mr. Cole. Eleanor would have spotted her a mile away. Yes, he agreed quietly. She certainly would have. 3 months after her humiliating dismissal from the Moonlight Diner, Tina stood outside yet another restaurant, clutching a worn resume. This was her 14th job application this week, and likely to be her 14th rejection. Word had spread through the local service industry with alarming efficiency. Tina Reynolds was blacklisted. She tugged nervously at her blouse, no longer designer label, but a thrift store find. The apartment with the granite countertops and city view was gone, replaced by a cramped studio in a neighborhood she'd once looked down upon. Her shiny credit cards had been cut up, her car repossessed, and her carefully cultivated image of sophisticated ambition replaced by the harsh reality of genuine struggle. "They're not hiring," a passing server informed her before she could even enter the restaurant. The young woman's eyes flicked over her with recognition. "Manager said not to even take your application." Tina's cheeks burned with humiliation. She'd underestimated how thoroughly Mr. Cole would follow through on his threat. It wasn't just Sunrise hospitality establishments that wouldn't touch her. It was every restaurant, bar, and cafe within a 100-mile radius, just as he'd promised. With no income and dwindling savings, she'd been forced to accept the settlement terms. Monthly payments toward the $3,742 she'd fraudulently collected in tips, plus interest. The legal document she'd signed contained a confession of her actions, which Ms. Winters had made clear would be submitted to the district attorney if she defaulted. As Tina trudged back to the bus stop, another downgrade from her former life, her phone buzzed with a text from her former co-worker Jenny. "You won't believe who's at the diner right now," it read, followed by a blurry, surreptitious photo of Mr. Cole sitting at his usual booth. But this time, he wasn't alone. A pretty young woman in the Moonlight Diner's server uniform was sitting across from him, laughing at something he'd said. Tina felt a surge of vindictive hope. "He's found his next victim," she typed back. "Warn her." 3 dots appeared as Jenny composed her reply. "Not what you think. That's Sarah, our new waitress. And new manager." "Manager?" Tina frowned at her phone. "What happened to Larry?" "Promoted to regional supervisor. Sarah runs Moonlight now. Mr. Cole personally hired her, single mom with a business degree who couldn't find work in her field. He's mentoring her." The bus arrived, but Tina remained rooted to the sidewalk, staring at her phone as Jenny's final message came through. "And FYI, unlike you, she has no idea who he really is. He never told her he owns the company. She just thinks he's a nice regular customer who believes in her potential." For the first time since her world had imploded, Tina felt something beyond self-pity and resentment, a twinge of genuine shame. Mr. Cole wasn't looking for another target to manipulate. He was doing exactly what she'd falsely accused him of, setting her up for genuinely helping someone who deserved it. Across town at the Moonlight Diner, business was booming under Sarah Thompson's management. The single mother of 2 had implemented small but meaningful changes: flexible scheduling for student employees, a community bulletin board for local events, and fresh flowers on every table, a touch inspired by her grandmother's kitchen. "The quarterly numbers are impressive," Mr. Cole noted, reviewing the reports Sarah had prepared. "Customer satisfaction up 18%, staff turnover down by nearly a third." Sarah beamed with pride. "I still can't believe you convinced me to apply for the management position. I was just hoping for steady waitressing work." "You mentioned your business degree that very first day you served me," he reminded her. "Some people talk about their dreams as a means to an end. Others, like you, speak with genuine passion." Sarah didn't notice the momentary shadow that crossed his features as he remembered another waitress who had spoken of dreams with far less sincerity. "Speaking of which," she said, pulling a folder from her bag, "I've been working on that community outreach program we discussed. A partnership with the Downtown Women's Shelter to provide job training and food service." Mr. Cole nodded approvingly. "People deserve second chances when they're genuine about changing their circumstances." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "Everyone has potential if given the right opportunity." As they continued their meeting, neither noticed Marge watching from behind the counter, a knowing smile on her lined face. She'd been the one to suggest Sarah apply when the management position suddenly opened following Tina's dramatic departure. She'd recognized something in the struggling young mother that reminded her of herself years ago: determination untainted by entitlement, ambition without manipulation. Meanwhile, Tina finally boarded the bus, sinking into a seat as the reality of her situation pressed down upon her. She'd have to look for work outside the service industry now, perhaps retail or office cleaning jobs she'd once considered beneath her. Her phone buzzed again with a final message from Jenny. "BTW, your replacement is killing it." The boutique Sarah opened in the diner's unused storage room is making bank, sells handmade accessories from local artists. Mr. C provided the startup money. Tina turned off her phone, unable to bear more reminders of what could have been hers had her approach been genuine. The boutique, the mentorship, the legitimate path to success that she'd been too impatient and dishonest to pursue. As the bus rumbled through neighborhoods growing progressively less affluent, Tina gazed out at the rain-streaked window. For the first time she allowed herself to consider whether Mr. Cole had actually done her a favor in his own way. By cutting short her path of deception, he'd forced her to confront the person she'd become, someone who viewed others solely as stepping stones to what she wanted. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Mr. Cole sat at his usual booth, reviewing business proposals between bites of toast. Sarah approached with a coffee pot and a warm smile. "Your usual, Mr. Cole." "Thank you, Sarah. How's Benny doing with his math classes?" Her face lit up at the mention of her son. "Much better since you recommended that tutor. I can actually afford now that the boutique is turning a profit." As she poured his coffee, neither noticed the woman who paused outside the diner, gazing through the window. Tina, hair pulled back simply, dressed in the uniform of a downtown courier service, watched the scene for a long moment before continuing on her route. She'd found honest work at last, delivering packages across the business district. The pay was modest, but legitimate. The tiny apartment she shared with 2 roommates was humble but hers. The path forward was harder than her schemes had promised, but built on firmer ground. And as for Mr. Cole, he continued dining at the same booth each Friday morning, investing not just in businesses, but in people who deserved the chance she'd squandered, proving that real connections were indeed worth more than gold-digging schemes ever were.